A wildfire in Utah grew 9 miles in one single night. Not in a week, not over 3 days. In one night, while most people were asleep in their beds. The fire is now bigger than the entire city of Salt Lake City. And right now, today, firefighters cannot put it out. In fact, a few nights ago, the people fighting this fire were told to pull back and stop trying to stop it, because getting close to it could have gotten them killed. For families living in the small towns nearby, this isn't just a story on the news, it's their front yard. It's the hillside they see every morning, now glowing orange at night instead of dark and quiet. Some of them have already packed up their cars and left. Others are sitting by their phones, waiting to find out if they're next. That is the kind of fire season Utah is living through right now. Whole towns have been ordered out of their homes. More than 100 cattle are already gone. And firefighters who were supposed to be the ones running toward danger were told this weekend, do not go near it. So how does a fire grow that fast? What made professional firefighters back away instead of fighting? And why are experts saying the next few days could be even more dangerous than what we've already seen? I promise you, by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why this weekend could make everything so much worse than it already is. The night. This fire changed everything. Let's start with the fire everyone in Utah is talking about right now. It's called the Widemouth 2 fire, and it is burning in central Utah, in a place called Millard County near the small towns of Fillmore and Kanosh. Right now, as of today, this fire has burned more than 84,000 acres. I want you to really sit with that number for a second, because it doesn't mean much until you compare it to something you actually know. Salt Lake City covers about 68,000 acres of land. That means this one fire is already bigger than the whole city. It's like watching a fire eat an entire major city's worth of land, except instead of buildings, it's forests, hillsides, and open range where cattle graze. And here's the part that should really grab your attention. This fire has 0% containment. 0. When firefighters say a fire is contained, they mean they've built a wall around part of it, using dug-up dirt lines, water, or cleared land, so the fire can't spread past that point. 0% containment means none of that has worked yet. The fire is still doing whatever it wants. To put the size of this fire in a few more ways, you can actually picture 84,000 acres is roughly the same as 63,000 football fields lined up side by side. If you tried to walk around the outside edge of this fire, just the outline of it, you'd be walking for days, not hours. And this is a fire that, as of right now, firefighters have not managed to slow down in any meaningful way since it exploded. This isn't some far-off wilderness fire that only rangers and hikers need to worry about either. It's burning close enough to real towns, real schools, and real family ranches that thousands of people have had to think seriously about whether they might need to leave their homes behind. So how did a fire get this big, this fast, with 0% containment? It actually started small. It began with a lightning strike on July the 27th, deep in a forest called Fish Lake National Forest. For the first few days, it moved slowly. Firefighters were keeping an eye on it, but it wasn't the emergency it is now. Then everything changed on one single night. On the night of Saturday, August 1st, strong winds picked up and slammed into the fire. Those winds pushed the flames about 9 miles to the north in just a matter of hours. By the next morning, the fire had already tripled in size. Think about that. 9 miles is a huge distance for a wall of fire to travel in one night. If you tried to walk 9 miles, it would take you around 3 hours. This fire did it while people were sleeping. And here is the moment that tells you everything about how serious this got. When the fire broke through the line firefighters had built to stop it, near the town of Kanosh, officials made a hard call. They pulled their firefighters back from the front of the fire completely. The U.S. Forest Service said the fire was growing too fast and too dangerously for anyone to safely stand in front of it. They said no amount of firefighters or equipment was going to stop it from moving forward, at least not until the weather changed. Think about what that really means. These are trained professionals whose entire job is to run toward fires other people run away from. And even they said it wasn't safe to get close. That's not a small warning. That's about as serious as it gets in the wildfire world. Imagine spending years training for a job that means walking straight at danger most people run away from. And then one night, your bosses tell you to stop. Not because you gave up, because the fire itself had become something no amount of training could safely handle. That's the moment central Utah found itself in on August 1st, and it's the reason this fire earned so much attention so fast. Now, this fire is just one part of a much bigger story. Utah is having one of the worst fire years it has ever recorded, and there's a very clear reason why. But before we get into that, I need to ask you for something. If you're finding this helpful, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. And here's the honest reason why that actually matters this time. This fire is changing every single day. The acreage, the containment number, the evacuation zones, all of it is shifting fast, sometimes overnight, just like the fire itself. If you subscribe and turn on notifications, you'll get the newest numbers the moment I post them, instead of finding out days later when the information is already old and maybe even wrong. In a situation moving this fast, being a day behind can actually matter. So take 10 seconds, hit subscribe, and let's keep going, because this next part explains exactly why this fire and so many others got so out of control in the first place. Why Utah turned into a tinderbox. Here's a question you might be asking. Why is this happening now? Why is this year so much worse than normal? The answer starts almost a year ago with something you wouldn't expect to matter this much. Snow. The winter before this one, the winter of 2025 into 2026, was the warmest winter Utah has ever recorded. On top of that, it was also one of the driest winters for snow that the state has ever seen. Now, you might be thinking, why does snow from last winter matter for a fire happening in August? Here's the simple answer. Snow melts slowly through spring, and that melted snow soaks into the ground. It waters the plants, the grass, and the brush all across the state. When there's very little snow, all of that vegetation dries out much earlier in the year, and much more completely than it normally would. So by the time summer hit, Utah's plants and trees were already stressed and dry months before fire season usually gets dangerous. In southern Utah especially, fire officials say the vegetation is as dry as it has been in 100 years. Let that sink in. Not since your great-grandparents were young has the ground out there been this thirsty. Think of a forest like a giant sponge. In a normal year, that sponge soaks up melted snow all spring, staying damp and heavy well into summer. A damp sponge doesn't catch fire easily, but this year, the sponge barely got wet in the first place. By the time the hot months arrived, it was already dried out and brittle like a sponge that's been sitting in the sun for weeks. All it takes after that is one spark. Then summer arrived and made things even worse. A giant dome of high pressure settled over the region, the kind of weather pattern that traps heat underneath it like a lid on a pot. Picture putting a lid over a pot of boiling water on the stove. The steam has nowhere to escape, so it just keeps building up underneath. A heat dome works in a similar way with warm air, holding it in place over the same region for days or even weeks at a time, instead of letting it move through and cool off like weather usually does. That pushed temperatures way up. At the same time, the air became incredibly dry. In some of the fire zones, the humidity, which is basically how much moisture is in the air, dropped to just 5 to 10%. To put that in perspective, a comfortable day usually has humidity somewhere between 30 and 50%. 5 to 10% is closer to what you'd expect in a desert, with almost no water anywhere nearby. Add in strong, gusty winds on top of all that dry heat, and you have the exact recipe wildfires need to explode. Firefighters actually think about it almost like a recipe with 3 ingredients. You need something that can burn, like dry grass and trees. You need heat, like blazing summer temperatures. And you need oxygen, which wine delivers straight into the flames like someone blowing on a campfire to make it bigger. This year, Utah had all 3 ingredients stacked at nearly their worst levels, all at the same time. One fire official in the area said, "The fire behavior they've seen this year is more intense than anything many of them can remember." That's coming from people who have spent their whole careers around fire. Now let's look at the actual numbers, because they tell the story better than words can. So far in 2026, Utah has recorded 755 separate wildfires. Together, they have burned more than 474,000 acres. To understand how huge that is, compare it to last year. In all of 2024, wildfires across the entire state burned about 90,000 acres for the whole year. This year has already burned more than 5 times that amount, and it isn't even the peak of fire season yet. State officials say this is now the second worst wildfire year Utah has ever recorded, going all the way back to when they started keeping track. The only year worse was 2007, when fires burned over 629,000 acres. If this year keeps going the way it's going, 2026 could end up breaking that record completely. Think about how strange that is for a second. Somewhere in Utah, in 2007, people were living through what was, at the time, an unforgettable disaster. And here we are, almost 20 years later, watching a year that could beat it, with months of hot, dry weather still ahead. Fire seasons used to feel like a summer event that came and went. Now, in a year like this one, it feels more like an ongoing emergency that keeps finding new fuel to burn. Here's something interesting buried in those numbers, too. Out of those 755 fires, 380 were started by people. That could be things like an unattended campfire, a spark from equipment, or fireworks. Those human-caused fires burned about 74,000 acres. Another 321 fires were started naturally, mostly by lightning strikes, just like the one that started our main fire. Those lightning fires burned a much bigger area, about 145,000 acres. But here's the number that really stands out. There are 54 fires where officials still aren't completely sure how they started. Those fires alone have burned over 253,000 acres. That's more than half of everything that's burned in Utah this year, all from fires we can't even fully explain yet. The Widemouth 2 fire we just talked about falls into this group. Investigators believe lightning caused it, but they haven't officially confirmed the cause yet. Let's slow down on those human-caused fires for a second, because that number matters more than it might seem. Out of 755 fires, 380 were started by people. That's more than half of all the fires this year, even though they only account for a smaller share of the total acreage burned. Usually that happens because human-caused fires tend to start closer to roads, campsites, and towns, where crews can reach them faster and stop them before they spread too far. Lightning-caused fires, on the other hand, often start deep in remote forests and canyons where it takes crews much longer to even reach them, which gives those fires more time to grow before anyone can respond. That's part of why lightning fires burned almost twice as many acres as human-caused ones, even though there were fewer of them. Here's another way to picture how bad 2026 has been. The worst wildfire year Utah has ever recorded was back in 2007, when fires burned about 629,000 acres across the whole year. Right now, with several months of fire season still ahead, Utah has already burned over 474,000 acres. That means this year is closing in fast on a record that has stood for almost 20 years, and it's only early August. So now you understand the setup. A historically dry winter, a brutal summer heat dome, air drier than a desert, and gusty winds ready to fan any spark into a monster. To really understand how bad this got on the ground, in real towns where real families live, we need to go back to where the Widemouth 2 fire actually is right now, and what it's doing to the people who live there. The fire nobody can get in front of. Let's go back to the Widemouth 2 fire, because this is where the story gets personal. After that explosive growth on the night of August 1st, the fire kept climbing. By Sunday morning, it had tripled from where it started. By Monday, it had grown again, jumping to around 68,000 acres. As of today, it sits at roughly 84,229 acres, and it is still 0% contained. One thing fire experts are watching closely is something that used to be rare. This fire kept growing aggressively even after the sun went down. Normally, fires slow down at night. The air cools off, humidity rises a little, and flames calm down. Firefighters actually count on that nighttime break. It's often the only window they get to move equipment into position, rest their crews, and plan the next day's attack. But officials say that overnight window of relief is shrinking. With warmer nights and drier air sticking around after dark, fires like this one just keep pushing forward, hour after hour, with barely any break. That helps explain how this fire covered 9 miles in a single overnight push. There was no nighttime slowdown to save anyone time. Crews, who would normally get a few calmer hours to catch their breath instead, watched the fire keep charging north in the dark. So what does a fire this size actually do to the towns nearby? Let's talk about Fillmore first. It's a small city of about 2,800 people, and part of it is now under a mandatory evacuation order. Specifically, homes east of State Route 99 between 500 South and 1,600 South have been told to leave. In the smaller town of Kanosh, people living south of 300 South, along Turkey Track Lane and Cemetery Road, have also been ordered out. And in the town of Meadow, families living east of State Route 133, stretching from Cemetery Road all the way to Reservation Drive, are under the same mandatory evacuation order. For anyone who had nowhere else to go, officials opened an emergency shelter at the old National Guard Armory right in Fillmore. Try to imagine what that actually looks like. Families packing whatever fits in a car in a matter of minutes, grabbing photos, medicine, and pets, not knowing if their house will still be standing when they're allowed to go back. Local officials have also been holding community meetings, standing up in front of worried neighbors to explain what the fire is doing and answer questions. Because in a moment like this, people want to hear directly from the people fighting it, not just read updates online. Fillmore's mayor has said his biggest long-term worry isn't just the flames right now, it's what happens after. A large part of the watershed, the hillsides and drainage areas that feed the town's water supply near a ridge called Mount Catherine, has already burned. Burned hillsides don't hold rain and snow melt the way healthy ones do. Instead of soaking in slowly, water rushes straight down the slope, which can cause flooding and mudslides for months or even years after the fire itself is finally out. In other words, even once this fire is contained, its effects on this community won't be over. Now, here's something that might surprise you. Even with a fire this massive, covering an area bigger than a whole city, officials say no homes have been destroyed so far. 0 structures lost. That's honestly incredible when you think about how fast and how far this fire has moved. It's a direct result of firefighters working nonstop to protect homes and buildings, even while pulling back from trying to stop the fire's edge itself. Protecting people and protecting buildings became the priority, instead of trying to fight the fire head-on everywhere at once. The one place this fire has hit hard is agriculture. Millard County officials confirmed that more than 100 cattle have died in the fire. For the ranching families in this area, that's not just a number, that's their livelihood, their animals, sometimes generations of work gone in a matter of days. 2 firefighters have also been hurt, though thankfully with only minor injuries so far. Both the mayor of Fillmore and Millard County as a whole have signed local emergency declarations, which basically opens the door for more state and federal help and resources to flow in faster. It's easy to read a list of street names and evacuation zones and skim right past them, but each one of those streets is somebody's home. It's the house someone grew up in, or the ranch a family has run for generations. When officials read out a boundary like east of State Route 99 between 500 South and 1,600 South for the families living inside that boundary, it means loading up whatever they can carry and hoping there's still a house to come back to. If you're anywhere near central Utah, here's what you need to know about the roads. Highway 91 is closed in the fire area. Corn Creek Road near Kanosh is closed. Roads east of Meadow are closed too. A popular campground in the area, Potter's Pond, has also been shut down until further notice, since it sits close enough to the fire that keeping it open just isn't safe right now. Interstate 15 between Kanosh and Fillmore is technically still open, but officials are asking people to avoid driving through there unless they absolutely have to, so emergency vehicles can move freely. That's a small thing anyone passing through can do to help, simply choosing a different route or postponing a trip that isn't urgent. Even up near Salt Lake County, far from the main fire, Interstate 80 near Parley's Canyon had a closure earlier this week because of a completely separate brush fire that started right next to the road. The lesson here is simple. Fire-related closures are popping up in more places than just the main fire zone, so always check before you drive anywhere in the state right now, even if you think you're nowhere near the danger. So, who's actually fighting this fire? Right now, about 420 firefighters are assigned to the Widemouth 2 fire. On Tuesday morning, a more experienced group called the Great Basin Complex Incident Management Team took over command. Think of them like the specialists who get called in when a situation is too big and too complicated for a regular team to handle alone. They're using 2 main strategies. One is called direct attack, which means actually engaging the fire's edge where it's safe enough to do so. That might mean crews with hoses and shovels working right along the flames, cutting them off before they spread further. The other is called indirect attack, which means building containment lines further away from the fire, out ahead of where it's expected to go, so there's a wall ready and waiting when the fire arrives. Think of it like digging a moat around a castle before the enemy even shows up, instead of trying to fight them hand to hand at the gate. Neither strategy is easier or safer by default. Both require careful planning, constant weather updates, and a lot of trust between crews on the ground and the commanders directing them from above. Choosing between these 2 strategies depends completely on how the fire is behaving. When a fire is moving too fast and too unpredictably, like Widemouth 2 was on that first explosive night, direct attack becomes too dangerous, and crews have to rely almost entirely on the indirect approach, building lines from a safe distance and hoping the fire runs into them. On top of both of those ground strategies, helicopters and airplanes have been flying non-stop, dropping water and fire retardant on the areas closest to homes and towns. Fire retardant is a thick, reddish liquid dropped from the air that doesn't put out flames by itself, but it coats vegetation and slows the fire down enough for ground crews to catch up. If you've ever seen wildfire footage with bright red or pink lines painted across a hillside, that's exactly what you're looking at. One U.S. Forest Service spokesperson explained it simply. Crews are stretched thin right now, not just in Utah, but across the entire western United States, because so many fires are burning at once. They've requested more crews and equipment, and they're bringing them in as soon as they become available. That kind of honesty tells you just how strained resources are this year. Think about it like a small town with only a handful of ambulances, suddenly facing 5 emergencies at once, all in different neighborhoods. Utah isn't the only state on fire right now. Nevada and Idaho are dealing with their own serious fires too, which means everyone is trying to pull from the same shared pool of firefighters, planes, and equipment. There simply aren't enough of any of it to go around as fast as everyone would like. There is some financial help on the way, though. The Federal Emergency Management Agency has approved what's called a Fire Management Assistance Grant for Utah. In plain terms, that means the federal government will cover a large share of the cost of fighting this fire. Things like paying crews, moving equipment, setting up camps for firefighters, and buying supplies. It won't put the fire out any faster, but it does mean the state isn't shouldering this enormous cost completely alone. There is some good news buried in all of this, too. Utah has other large fires burning as well, and a few of them are actually under control. The Babylon fire down in San Juan County burned 107,189 acres, but it's now 95% contained. The Cottonwood fire in Beaver County burned even more, close to 97,000 acres, and it's also sitting at 95% contained. The Johnson Canyon fire in Box Elder County is smaller, at around 6,889 acres, but it's making solid progress too, now around 65% contained. Not every fire in Utah is a lost cause. Some crews are winning their battles. It's just that the Widemouth 2 fire, along with a newer fire called the Black Canyon Fire burning in San Pete and Emery counties, are still very much active emergencies. The Black Canyon Fire is smaller, last reported around 800 acres, but it triggered new evacuations near the town of Ephraim, after tricky, shifting winds made it hard for crews to predict which way it would move next. Each of these fires has its own story, too. The Babylon Fire down in San Juan County burned through remote, rugged land far from most towns, which is part of why crews were able to build such strong containment lines around it. The Cottonwood Fire in Beaver County actually made national headlines back in June, when it was briefly the largest wildfire burning anywhere in the entire country. Seeing it, now sitting at 95%, contained shows just how much progress crews have made since then, even while a brand new emergency was unfolding at the same time with Widemouth 2. It's worth pointing out just how much total ground all of these fires cover when you add them together. Babylon, Cottonwood, Johnson Canyon, Black Canyon, and Widemouth 2 alone account for well over 300,000 acres burned this year, and that's without even counting the hundreds of smaller fires scattered across the rest of the state. Utah isn't dealing with one emergency, it's dealing with several at the same time, all pulling from the same stretched pool of firefighters, aircraft, and equipment we just talked about. Before we move into the forecast, there's one more part of this story that matters, and honestly, it's the part that puts everything else into perspective. Back in June, before this current fire even started, tragedy struck a specialized firefighting crew working near the Utah and Colorado border. A helicopter response crew, the kind of team that gets dropped into remote areas to stop new fires before they explode, got caught in what's called a burnover. That's when a fire moves so fast that it overtakes firefighters before they can reach safety, forcing them to use emergency shelters as a last resort to survive. 3 crew members died that day: Emily Barker, who was 38, Nick Hutcherson, who was 27, and Sydney Watson, who was also 27. A 4th crew member, Nathan Matthews, was badly hurt and fought for his life in the hospital for weeks before he passed away from his injuries too. A 5th crew member survived, but was hospitalized with serious burns. These were people whose entire job was running toward danger to protect towns, forests, and families they had never even met. One person close to the firefighting community said it best: "Wildland firefighters are some of the most underrated public servants we have. Most people never think about them until smoke fills the sky and helicopters are dropping water overhead. Then everybody understands. Every decision being made out on these fire lines today, every choice to pull crews back instead of pushing forward into danger, carries the weight of what happened to that crew back in June. When officials decided it was too dangerous to keep firefighters in front of the Widemouth 2 fire, that wasn't an overly cautious decision made out of nowhere. It was a lesson learned the hardest way possible, just weeks earlier. So now you understand where things stand right now. A record-breaking fire season, a massive fire still completely uncontained, towns evacuated, firefighters stretched thin and grieving losses of their own, and unfortunately, the weather this weekend is not going to make any of this easier. The weekend that could make everything worse. Here's where I need your full attention, especially if you live anywhere in central or northern Utah. Today, temperatures near the fire zone are expected to reach around 97 degrees, with smoky skies and light winds. That's already uncomfortable and dangerous for firefighting. But tomorrow, temperatures are expected to climb even higher, up toward 100 degrees, with patchy smoke hanging over the area. Because of these conditions, the National Weather Service has issued what's called a red flag warning across several parts of the state. A red flag warning is basically a signal that the weather is lining up perfectly for fires to start easily and spread fast. It's not a warning that a specific fire is coming. It's a warning that if any fire starts at all, even a small one, the conditions are set up to help it grow out of control almost immediately. Right now, that warning covers areas including the San Rafael Swell, the Manti National Forest, the Tavaputs Plateau, and the western Uinta Basin. These warnings mention winds of 20 to 30 miles per hour, with gusts reaching as high as 40 to 50 miles per hour, combined with humidity as low as 5 to 6%. If you remember earlier, that's close to desert-level dryness. Under those conditions, any new spark, even a tiny one, could turn into a major fire almost instantly. Now here comes the part that has fire officials the most worried. This weekend, Friday and Saturday, temperatures near the fire zone are expected to climb even higher, close to 101 degrees both days. Down in southern Utah, near St. George, temperatures could reach near 110 degrees. That's dangerously hot even for people just going about their normal lives, let alone for firefighters, working outside all day in heavy gear, wearing thick protective clothing, and carrying heavy equipment up and down steep, smoky terrain. Stack that heat on top of fuel that's already drier than it's been in a century. And you can understand why officials keep repeating the same warning. The ground out there is basically ready to burn the moment it gets the chance. Heat like this doesn't just make people uncomfortable. It pulls whatever tiny bit of moisture is left out of the plants and soil, making everything even more flammable than it already was. Let me explain what's actually causing this weather pattern in the simplest way I can. Imagine a big, heavy weather system, like an invisible dome of high pressure, sitting almost still over the area where Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico all meet. That system is acting like a lid, blocking moist air from the south from ever reaching Utah. At the same time, a separate weather system to the north is pushing some cooler air down into the state. But it's also dragging in something else nobody wants: wildfire smoke drifting all the way from fires burning in Oregon and Washington. That means even areas far away from the actual flames could deal with hazy skies and unhealthy air this week. That combination of heat, wind, and dry air is also why smoke has become such a big problem across such a wide area. Smoke doesn't just stay near the fire that made it. It rises up into the atmosphere and rides the wind for hundreds of miles, which is exactly what's happening with smoke drifting all the way down from fires burning in Oregon and Washington. So even someone standing far from any actual flames, maybe up along the Wasatch Front, could still end up breathing hazy, smoky air pulled in from fires burning in a completely different state. So is there any hope on the horizon? Actually, yes, a little. Longer range forecasts show a slight chance of showers and thunderstorms possibly starting Saturday night and continuing into next week. That would be a sign that seasonal rains, sometimes called the monsoon, might finally start returning to southern Utah's mountains. Normally, this kind of news would be something to celebrate. Rain is exactly what a drought-stricken state needs. But here's the twist, and this is really important to understand. When the very first storms roll in after a long, extremely dry stretch like this one, they often don't bring much rain at all. Instead, they can produce something called dry lightning. That's when lightning strikes the ground, but the rain from the storm evaporates before it ever reaches the ground, because the air underneath the storm is so hot and dry. So picture this. Dark storm clouds build up overhead, lightning flashes down toward the earth, but almost no rain actually lands. People see the clouds and think relief has finally arrived, when really, that same storm could be sparking brand new fires in places that are already bone dry. Under drought conditions like Utah is facing right now, dry lightning is considered one of the most dangerous weather events there is, because it can start new fires in dozens of places at once, all while everyone assumes the rain is helping. It's a strange, almost backward kind of danger. Most people hear thunder and think a storm is about to help put out fires, not start new ones. But firefighters know better. They watch these storms roll across the mountains and hold their breath, because a single lightning strike can hit dry brush in a spot nobody is watching. And by the time anyone notices smoke, a brand new fire could already be racing across a hillside. On top of the lightning risk, there's the wind to worry about too. Remember, this is the same kind of southerly wind pattern that pushed the Widemouth 2 fire 9 miles north in a single night. If winds like that return this weekend, as forecasters expect, any fire already burning could take off again just as fast as it did before, and any brand new fire sparked by lightning could explode just as quickly. Officials tracking fire conditions across the country say Utah's fire risk will remain above normal for the entire month of August, whether the monsoon shows up or not. In other words, this weekend isn't the finish line. It's just one especially dangerous stretch inside a much longer emergency. That's a hard truth for a state that's already exhausted. Firefighters have been working around the clock for weeks. Families have been packing go bags and watching the horizon. And instead of a clear end in sight, the forecast is telling everyone to brace for more of the same, at least for now. So, with all of that heat, wind, dryness, and the risk of dry lightning stacking up together, what can you actually do if you live in this state right now? That's exactly what we need to cover next. What you can do right now, if you live in Utah, especially anywhere near central or southern Utah, here's what officials are urging everyone to do. These recommendations aren't just general advice pulled from a pamphlet. They come directly from the National Weather Service and Utah's own fire officials, based on exactly what they're watching unfold on the ground right now. First, follow every fire restriction in your area, without exceptions. Right now, under these conditions, a single spark from a campfire, fireworks, machinery, or even a chain dragging behind a trailer could start the next major fire. Utah's governor has been direct about this. He said the best way anyone can support the firefighters already working themselves to exhaustion is by making sure they don't have to fight a brand new fire on top of everything else. Avoid anything that could create a spark, even something that seems small and harmless. Second, sign up for emergency alerts in your county if you haven't already. These are usually free text or phone alerts that tell you immediately if evacuation orders change near you. And take a few minutes to actually learn your evacuation zone before you ever need it, not after a fire is already at your doorstep. You can usually find this information on your county sheriff's website, and it only takes a few minutes to check, which is a small price for the peace of mind it gives you. Third, put together a go bag now while you have time to think clearly. That means any medicine you take regularly, important documents like ID or insurance papers, a phone charger, some water, and supplies for any pets you have. If you own livestock, start making a plan for them too. Since moving large animals takes time, you might not have once an evacuation order comes through. Fourth, and this one is simple but critical, if officials issue an evacuation order for your area, leave immediately. Don't wait to see how bad it gets. Remember, this exact fire moved 9 miles in a single night. There's no safe amount of time to wait and see with fire behavior like that. It can be tempting to stay just a little longer to grab one more thing or wait for a neighbor to decide first. But with fire moving this fast, those extra minutes are exactly what officials are begging people not to risk. Fifth, if you're anywhere in the smoke zone, and that includes areas as far away as the Salt Lake and Utah valleys along with parts of southwest Utah, pay attention to air quality alerts. If you have any breathing conditions, try to limit how much time you spend outside. Wildfire smoke is a real and serious health concern, not just an inconvenience. And finally, if you're planning to drive anywhere in central Utah, especially through Millard, San Pete, or Emery counties, check road conditions before you leave. These situations are changing quickly, and roads can close with very little warning. A road that's open when you leave your house could be closed by the time you're supposed to get there, so a quick check before you go can save you a lot of trouble. Here's how everything comes together. Utah is living through one of the worst wildfire seasons it has ever recorded. Hundreds of fires, hundreds of thousands of acres burned, families evacuated from their homes, firefighters stretched thin across the entire western United States, some of them still grieving friends they lost just weeks ago. And now, a dangerously hot, dry, windy weekend is heading straight toward a fire that nobody has been able to stop yet. This story is still developing, and I'll keep bringing you the newest updates as soon as they come in. Numbers like acreage and containment can shift by the hour once winds pick up. So treat everything here as the latest snapshot, not the final word on how this ends. To every firefighter out there right now, on the Widemouth 2 fire, the Black Canyon fire, or any other fire burning across this state, thank you. What you're doing right now is harder than most of us will ever understand. And to the families in Fillmore, Kanosh, and Meadow watching those ridge lines every day, wondering which way the smoke is blowing, we see you too. If this video helped you understand what's happening, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next update. And I want to hear from you. Are you or someone you know dealing with this fire right now or living under one of these evacuation orders? Let me know in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.